Okay, as you may tell from reading the title, this is a reflections video. It's not going to have a recap in it really, but it is going to reflect on a session of actual play. And the game that was played was Circle of Hands. This is a game produced by Adept Press, written by Ron Edwards, and it's an Iron Age fantasy game, which is quite different from other fantasy games in terms of setting elements and how magic works and how combat works. And very famously, the combat chapter is called the Killing chapter. And, well, it's very obvious why that is so. All right, now we have been running the game as a function of being members of our RPG learning group in a way that is not a part of the game and really not recommended for the game, but is the way that we learn games together, and that is to do it as a round-robin game mastering experience. So we figure out how many people are going to play and how many sessions each person should handle as the game master, and then in a shared environment, we move forward and each have an opportunity to run the game for a number of sessions and to play the game for the rest of the sessions. So in this experiment, we had 3 participants. I ran the first 2 sessions. Ivan of the Ivan Mike 1968 YouTube channel ran the next 2 sessions, and now Aloy of the Umbermancer channel is running the last 2 sessions. And when we get to the end of everyone having run 2, then we'll decide if we want to continue on with Circle of Hands, if we want to restart Circle of Hands, or if we want to move on to a completely different game. Now, this is not something that's recommended for Circle of Hands in particular, and the reason why is the way that preparation for the situations of play, the way that's done, there is a distinctly better effect when this is allowed to develop in the same set of hands for the same set of hands, right? So the same one game master for the same players, and the same players are drawing through their experience of which characters they're going to play, because this is a feature of Circle of Hands is that a pool of characters is created. And you can play any of the characters that's in the pool, but you cannot play the same character twice in a row. So you could alternate between them, or you could, cycle through everybody before repeating, or something in between. So the players are working through that pool of characters, and the game master is following the procedures for preparing what the game calls ventures. And as play develops, as the characters move through the setting, and as they make decisions and have setbacks and have successes and so on and so forth, the campaign grows around them. By cycling through different game masters but keeping the same persistent campaign world, we introduce some artificial constraints to how things develop, particularly in terms of the ventures. And that's unfortunate, but hopefully the other examples of long-form campaign play that you can find on the Casting Shadows blog, on this YouTube channel, can kind of balance that out, because they are also examples of that kind of long-form play development, just with a different methodology than what is expressly laid out in Circle of Hands. So it's suboptimal as a way to play Circle of Hands, but it's highly optimal in getting a group of people as experienced as possible with the game from all sides, ostensibly in a short period of time. And that's where we really fell down, was at this 13-month delay. So my first reaction, or my first reflection on play, is that I really wish we had been able to play like 6 weeks running. Right? I do 2 sessions, Ivan does 2, Aloy does 2, all within a month and a half. That would have been the ideal way to run this game, but life just didn't let us do it. My second reflection is that this session was an incredible amount of fun. It has been fun every time we've sat down to play it. with a slight exception of the first time I ran it, which was the first time we played it at all. I had some experiences which drained a little bit of my fun. Like in the early parts of the session, I recognized I was making a mistake, and that, you know, disappointed me because, this was being done live and that kind of stuff. And there was no way to just stop and take back the mistake. It was too late. And then toward the end of the session, there was a very complicated combat, and I didn't feel as comfortable with the combat rules as I wanted to be, and I wasn't even as comfortable with the combat rules as I thought I was. And then in trying to resolve it while playing live, decisions that I was not satisfied with later were made. I was satisfied with them in the moment, but later being able to watch the video back, it's like, I have no idea why I did that. And so that was disappointing. So my first session wasn't as much fun for me as I thought, but it still was an awful lot of fun, and I really wanted to play the second session right away. And we played within a relatively short period of time, and I didn't have any regrets from that session, really. It was just a whole lot of fun. Then getting to play was fantastic, and I got to play 2 interesting characters, and was expecting that we would play again soon. And immediately after the 4th venture was complete, Aloy generated the 5th venture, following the procedures in the Circle of Hands book. And as is a part of our process, that venture preparation setup was recorded. So for each of the ventures, you can see how they were prepared, what the game master is thinking of, and so on and so forth. And each of the players gives a recap of their experience and their reflections, like this video. So this is for Venture 5. So this venture, we had, as always, we begin with hearing like a brief teaser about the area our characters, our Circle Knights, are moving into. So they're traveling through the land, and they are looking for threats that they feel compelled to throw themselves against, these magical, supernatural threats that are a harm to everyone. They're looking for, black wizards. They're looking for white wizards, neither side being all that desirable. And they're looking for monsters, and they're looking for political and social unrest, and you name it. And they are the sort of people who can't just let things lie. They're the type of people who get involved. Now, each one of the characters in our pool of characters is quite different. But the first choice that I found myself facing was that the previous character I had played, a character named Anselm, has this trait of being a romantic. And not in the lovey-dovey sense, but in the sense of he has an idealized view of what the world is and how the world works, and he sees himself as the protagonist in a great struggle for bringing the revelation of this great truth to light. And there are a number of the characters in the pool who have this same trait. Now, of course, each one of them is different, but I found myself not wanting to have that kind of fun. I didn't want to take on another romantic back to back. So the teaser that we learned about the area that we were moving into, the information of what our Circle Knights would find interesting, was that this was a mountainous region, and it was an area that has fortresses built, and there's also rumors of secret passes through the mountains linking these different communities, and one community is unaware of the passes linking them to another community, and so on and so forth. And so as a martial group with some very martial members, having this strategic knowledge may prove useful for some future invasion of the Crescent Lands, the area that we live in, or in dealing with supernatural beings, or should this powerful circle of liches return to the area. I mean, there's so many reasons to want to have this tactical and strategic information. And so as we're settling into this community, this is very much on our minds. Can we get them to reveal to us where these passes are? But we find that there are stressors in the community. So this is what we know before we have to choose our characters. So I don't want to choose another romantic character. And I do feel interested in playing a wizard, because that can help on the martial side. But there's one wizard who comes from the very lowest social stratum, and the other wizard who comes from the very highest social stratum. And this was a pretty easy decision. Well, I'll play the knight full wizard, not the circle knight who has combat training and some magical training. Right? I'll play the highest ranking character with the highest capacity in magic, and who happens to be extremely fun for me to play. So that makes good sense. But there was a temptation to play Hadrick, the Black Hadrick, who is a very, from other people's point of view, is a very suspicious character. And we've seen him do some pretty brave and heroic, but also very desperate things. And, magically as potent as Kai Ernst, but socially very different and very different feel to this character. So which one of these two do I want to bring into what seems like primarily a military situation? And so I thought, I want to have a lot of fun. I want to have an emotional connection to the character. I want to be in combative situations, because, as has been discussed earlier in the playlist, we haven't really had a lot of physical combat, and we really haven't seen a whole lot of magic. We've seen some real showstopper magic, but we haven't seen pervasive, I'm a wizard, I use magic to put my will upon the world kind of thing uses. So I thought, all right, even though I do want to play some of these other characters, I'm going to give into temptation, because we haven't played for a long time, and I really like this character, and so on and so forth. So I had a lot of reasons to choose Kai Ernst, and I chose him. What made this particularly amusing was that Ivan and Aloy made a bet that that's the character I would pick, but I did not let them socially manipulate me with their gaze into choosing a different character. And I'm glad that I chose the character I did. But it brought up an interesting observation, in that long-form play of the game likely sees the development of a culture of play around character selection. The game doesn't talk about it. It just says you will choose characters before play, which lets each group approach it the way that they will. And so far in our group, we have seen people say, "Oh, you go first," and we've seen people say to me, "Oh, you ran the first 2 sessions. You haven't played yet. You choose first." And we have seen people discuss, right? Well, I'd like to see these 2 characters in play. So if you play that one, I'll play this one, and so we've seen that manifest. But we could also imagine people throwing dice to see who rolled the highest number and seeing who get to choose first. Or you chose first last time, so we're going to go around our usual seating arrangement clockwise to see who picks. So that was an interesting idea to think about the culture of play around this really interesting and engaging part of play, actually choosing the character that you're going to play, and facing the prescription that you cannot play the same character twice in a row. You can't play them back to back. So you have to make a different decision. So if you had 2 people in a group, or 3 people in a group of characters, or 4 people in a group of characters, the range of options will really have an influence on who gets selected for which ventures. And this is precisely why you were told one piece of information about the region in which the characters will get involved in something interesting. So I chose Kai Ernst, and which I had played in my first venture, and Ivan chose Anselm, the character I had just played. So these two characters are different social ranks. Kai is gentry, and Anselm is a freeman. Kai is trained in high marshalry, so they among the best combatants, and Anselm is trained in low marshalry, a common combatant. So we can picture Kai fighting with sword and shield, and we can picture Anselm fighting with spear and shield as an image. So the situation opens up, and it's fantastic in this kind of situation to have Aloy as a game master, because where we are is a banquet hall and we're waiting for the banquet to start. And so sometimes in those situations you can end up feeling like you know that the room is full, you've been told it's full, but ultimately it feels like there's just your characters and whoever's talking to them. It feels empty. Now, Aloy has very well developed skills for removing that sense of emptiness. It feels like there are lots of people in the room, and it feels that you're not talking to the same person. Like you're not hitting the give me dialogue or share rumors with me options, but that you are walking in on conversations which are already in motion, and you're learning things tangentially, and you have to piece things together. And so there's a very real sense of being surrounded by people, being observed, people reacting to you, and that sort of stuff. So that's fantastic to see play out. And it's been a fun part of this whole experiment as we struggle with our habits for fantasy compared to the realities of this game's fantasy, and to see how, when we're thinking, when we're improvising, when we're responding to action, what kind of thoughts we have, how we envision the components that are put before us for venture preparation, and what shape and texture this lends to the Crescent Lands. And so playing under me, I know, felt very different than playing under Ivan, which has also felt very different when playing under Aloy. Yet there is this through line brought to us by our out of play talks about the game, our shared readings of the game, our discussions with the game's creator, Ron Edwards, and the characters. The characters are tying everything together. What's really interesting about the characters is, of course, that, and what part of what makes it fun is that we are not responsible for inserting a 1 or 2 or 3-dimensional version of the character. We're not imprinting the game with the character, and the character will remain immutable forever after. We're playing the character in one place and time, and someone else is going to play that character later, and they're not under any obligation to portray that character the way you portrayed that character. They're only obligated to honor what's on the character sheet, to bring into play actions which stem from this very intense, very directed character sheet. And they have to honor what the character has actually done before. But we're going to learn who the character is and how the character thinks and the way the character speaks and moves. We're going to learn that over many sessions. I think that's really cool. It's an exciting opportunity. Now, for me, playing Kai Ernst, I described it the first time I played him, and I felt it again. It's kind of like getting on a jet cycle, which only has one throttle setting, and that's full bore. This is a very ambitious character. He's described as both ambitious and fierce. He's very cunning. He's usually one of the more intelligent people in the room, and he has tremendous resources at his disposal, both in terms of the physical fighting, which is commonplace around them, and in the extremely potent magic, which is known to everyone but much less common. This is a character that has no conception of personal space and feels that he's due the attention of everyone, and that there are changes that need to be made, and he is a force for change. He doesn't always decide what the change is, and this was something that came out very differently from the first time I played him, but that there needs to be change. He's entered into this place. There is a problem, and there needs to be a resolution. So what was the problem? Well, we had a small community which had recently suffered this dramatic loss of its stores for the winter thanks to a fire. We investigated, and we couldn't turn up any ulterior motives or any guilty parties for setting the fire. It was probably, very likely, an actual accident, but it heightens an already existing tension, because the elders and the farmers, the herders, these people wanted to have a more open relationship with the villages around them, and they wanted to be able to, barter for what other people had. This wasn't taken very well by all members of the community. It seemed like weakness to some, it seemed like greed to others, and so on and so forth. The other major faction in this community wanted to take a more defensive stance. They wanted to go out into the mountains. They wanted to secure this fortress, and they were convinced that a neighboring community had placed soldiers in that fortress, and they were a real threat. And if the village weakened over the winter, then they could be overrun. And there's a rivalry between these two places. They are like the extreme edge of a region inside the Crescent Land called Roque, and the other extreme edge of a region in the Crescent Land called Flamberga. So they have some regional competitiveness or regional differences. They don't really trust each other for whatever reason. We never did delve that deeply into why these people don't like each other, other than just regional rivalry. But everyone seemed to accept that. But what they couldn't accept was what to do. They were torn. It was obvious they had been debating this argument. They had been going back and forth between, do we try and make peace with everybody and try and extend the hand of trade and fellowship, or do we show them our military strength? And so into this situation, we have Anselm, who's a freeman, so on a rank with many of the people who are going to be caught up in the fighting. And we have Kai, who's gentry, who is kind of looking down on a lot of the people who are pushing for the fight. He can respect their martial spirit, and he hopes he can respect their skill, but it's kind of like going to war with your own family from his perspective. He is looking at things more from we are the Crescent Lands, and we need to come together as the circle has come together, or we may perish. The forces arrayed against us, these supernatural forces, these magical forces, these are the real threat, and these are overwhelming, and we've had success in clearing them out of the region known as Roque, but the rest of the Crescent Lands are filled with them, and we, the circle, can't do it all ourselves. So from this point of view, he's looking at this kind of petty regional squabble as being an extremely serious problem, but not one that he can come in and just say, do it my way. He's hoping to be this force for change, and so he begins to poke and prod. Now, these pokings and proddings allowed Anselm to circulate among the people, and really, to find out more about how these people get along with each other and what is their real way of life. We have the sense that Kai is perhaps spending, the weeks that they've been there close to the chieftain, and they've been embroiled in these debates and talking about other places and how things are done and how things should be done. And when the venture starts, we're at this moment of frustration, right? We're reaching the breaking point. Something has to be decided, but this village is absolutely locked. It's deadlocked, and the chieftain cannot or will not make a determination. He wants to keep both sides happy. He wants to keep both sides safe, and he can't. He has to choose in favor of one. So while Kai is wrestling with this political situation in his own way, Anselm is out there among the people. So what Kai ends up doing is trying to demonstrate to the warriors that they don't understand war, that they're not quite ready, that they're still thinking in terms of glory, and they're still thinking in terms of, it'll be easy, all we have to do is this, only considering their part of the plan. And then once we've achieved our objective, then we'll be able to do, planning beyond what they've been able to achieve. And so Kai sets up a situation where he will wrestle with the leader of the warrior band under the chieftain. And he sets himself up to make this as short and as brutal a fight as possible. And the dice go with me, so that was nice. So this really is a very nasty and very satisfying use of the combat system, which highlighted a lot of things which I had noticed in reading and had seen hinted at in prior combats, but now for myself really got to experience how characters can invest their attributes, in a sense, being willing to go all in to create, muscle fatigue and to create fatigue itself, to take some risks in order to secure hold of the tempo, in order to go first, in order to go best, in order to take advantage of other situations. And so even though this other man was obviously younger than Kai Ernst and quicker than Kai Ernst, he falls into Kai Ernst's trap and finds himself, with a shattered face and unconscious in a heartbeat on the floor. Boom. The two men rush together, and then it's over. The difference between wrestling and fighting. Hoping to send the message that I could have just as easily killed him as this, right? And imagine had we been armed. Imagine had we been armored. Imagine what, horrific things could have been done. This is the message that Kai's trying to send. This sends the message to those who are looking for a more peaceful resolution that Kai must be on their side. But he begins to undermine their point of view as well, trying to shake some of these bedrock foundations of faith that they seem to have, which has brought them into deadlock. But this ultimately doesn't really work. The way the charm rolls have been working, there are some people that are on his side and in some factions, and other people that are on his side in other factions, but there's people on both sides that are definitely not liking and not trusting this stranger in their community. But worse than that, Kai is demonstrating points and then not explaining them. This is pretty interesting. So, whose side is he on? We're still in deadlock. And finally the chieftain puts it on him. Tonight, after the feast, you will break the deadlock. You will tell us which way we're going to go. So Anselm has been absent for all of this. And he comes back and reveals that there are some strange things going on in the grotto that this community uses for its place of worship. He doesn't really like the priest there all that much. He has found out that there is a relationship going on out of wedlock with the most successful and frankly least liked and most selfish landowner, or herder, and in a sense an Iron Age entrepreneur. Right? He has the largest holdings, the largest crew of workers, and they produce the best cheese, and they have the most goats, and all this stuff. And of course, he's one of the major people pushing for uh, opening up relationships for more barter, so that they can ostensibly get through the winter. But the feeling is that they want to have more luxury items. He wants to have the whatever it is that the neighboring communities are most proud of. He wants to have access to it. But right now, with this rivalry and this deadlock, he can't. So everything about him seems self-serving and selfish. So he is definitely not liked by either Circle Knight. So Anselm has discovered that his wife, who of course is the most desired woman in the community, is bedding down with the priest, and that she wants to get out of this community. And so Anselm seems like a prime suspect, or a prime opportunity to get her out of there, because eventually he's going to leave. So, interestingly, this woman was on Kai's radar. He was thinking about, are there other ways that this community is divided? He wants to show that they need to be a singular community, and that more than that, they're a community beyond their own borders, which is, he's unlikely to be successful in that regard, but it's something he wants to as a barrier or an obstacle he wants to assail. So he's looking for a desirable woman, to see who comes out of the woodwork to challenge him if he begins to pay attention to her. This never happens, because she has slipped out and she has met with Anselm, and then he comes back with all the marks of having had an enjoyable evening with a willing participant, and smelling like church. And it's like, what have you been up to? And so they catch each other up, and now there's a lot of suspicion. And so now I get to, as Kai, delve into the magic in a really meaty way, and cast some unusual spells that haven't come up, because they're not combat related. They're more insidious than that. And so I get to experience Kai deciding that he is going to share experience with Oswald, this very selfish, very narcissistic member of the community, and meaning that he's learning about every experience that this man has ever had. And then he's going to search through those memories as if they are his. Remember, there's no personal space. He has no sense of privacy. It's just, I need answers. I need to understand this place more. I need to understand you more. I need to know if there's some connection. Are you connected with burning down the storehouse, so that you can improve your position? Or do you suspect that the leader of the warriors, Gunther, did it to improve his position? Or is there some other force involved? How do you feel about this Friedrich, this other major owner of herds and whatnot? What is going on? So this simply turns up the deadlock, the confusion, the man's focus on his own interests, not really pushing us forward, but with this sense that his wife is involved in this very dangerous to her relationship with the priest, who completely underwhelmed Anselm. It's time to try and see if we can create more of these fissures, to show how the pressures in the community can so easily break them apart, which makes them weak when they should be trying to bind themselves together. So we go to have some kind of confrontation with the priest, Dietmar. And what that reveals is that there is this mysterious idol, and the idol has this, this demonic creature of black magic within it, and that some of these people have been corrupted, and the husband is accusing the wife, and he wants to kill her, and he wants justice, and he's just all over the map. He's just hurt and selfishness, and she is ice cold and expecting to be able to just leave that place. And the knights don't really want to have anything to do with it. They don't want any harm to come to anybody. They certainly don't want this woman to be killed for having been basically forced to marry someone who would benefit her and her family. It's an ugly situation into which enters this demonic force, and it kills the fat, selfish, horrible being, and then chooses to go after the wife. So Anselm's kind of torn. Does he, who does he want to defend? Nobody's all that interested in the priest. And Kai is interested in dealing with the monster, if it's even possible to deal with the monster. Well, the monster lashes out and kills the woman. So the husband and the wife, gone. And at her death, the whole area begins to be contaminated with black magic. This is an Herbaja zone, and this is something that we definitely do not want. But, it's too late now. But we can still take out the creature. And this opens up so many interesting opportunities from an in-character perspective, or on the tactical level of simply interacting with the game mechanics. And it all seems very fresh because we haven't used it in 13 months, but we also haven't used it to great depth. So, like, what does it mean if I invest points of brawn, this attribute, in order to go first? Is that a tactical decision I'm going to regret later on in the combat? How long is the combat going to be anyway? We're not really sure, right? So it's pretty, it's engaging on an emotional level as a person. It's engaging on a character level, because this emotional level of the player is an analog for the activation syndrome of the character. So it's very easy to mount yourself into the in-character perspective. Are we going to fight physically? Are we going to fight with magic? So I make some pretty risky decisions because, ambition, cunning, fierce, right? I figure this is the way to experience Kai as a wizard, right? So he's got a very damaging spell that can bypass armor and other things, and for a large sacrifice of his own life energy, it can do a devastating amount of damage with some luck, because you're still rolling dice. So I get to roll 3d6, total them up, and this gets to be turned into pure damage against this creature. And it is a devastating attack, but this creature is horrifying. It survives. And, the fight is on. Well, Anselm also is casting magic. And he dazzles it. He blinds it and confuses it so that it loses some of its speed and its ability to navigate around the space. This gives us a little bit of breathing room. And the combat plays out with great fear. In the middle of it, Dietmar the priest attacks Anselm because he's blaming him for the fact that all of this is happening, which I thought was an interesting moment of displacement. It's like, this is your idol and your grotto, and this affair between you and the married woman was entirely up to you, and all the other mysterious shenanigans may tie back to you. Who knows? So he throws himself into a furious battle against a trained warrior. But the creature's still there. The demonic force is still there. Well, working together, Anselm also blasts it with magic and is able to dissipate it. But it's not over yet, because being a demon, it leaves a trace of itself behind, a splotch. And this is a black stain on the world, which is able to, stain others. And they're notoriously hard to beat. And the huge investment in my initial damaging spell had reduced Kai's capacity for magical options to the point where he was now pretty much left with only doing physical magic. The Urbaja zone, which is spreading around them, was also making the type of magic he needs to cast, doesn't want to cast at this particular time, but needs to cast, harder. So, what is there to do? But working together, Anselm and Kai managed to destroy the splotch, destroy Dietmar, get out of there. Anselm is gravely wounded, but can be saved. And Kai is exhausted and furious and really not able to do anything at this time about this new zone that's just been wasted, obliterated by black magic, by Urbaja. But the deadlock in the community has been resolved. And, through the horrors and the trauma of all of this, and, through the tender ministrations of Kai and Anselm in talking to them about all the things that have happened and what was lurking in their midst, perhaps they were able to tie themselves together and to forge connections to their neighboring communities in order to survive the winter, where Kai and Anselm wintered with them. And ultimately, this turns out to be great for the young king in Rolke. So it's a pretty interesting venture all the way through. I really got to get a meaty combat experience, which I may end up talking about in a different video, and a really satisfying magical experience. One thing as my last reflection I do want to add is that the way the system works is that the mechanics themselves are pretty simple. It's a very quick roll, and it's roll in total, and then assign the results. That all happens on a math level on your notepad, but it's state intention, roll determines success and degree of success, describe. And in combat and in magic, it can seem like you're not needing to apply specific maneuvers, you're not needing to conform to specific situations, like in order to recover this, you need to rest in this type of environment for this length of time while consuming this type of food. It's not one of those situations. So the resources that you invest in a combat that bring about fatigue, they are recovered pretty quickly moving into the next scene, as long as we remember the realities of the situation and make sure that the character is being restful, the character is trying to recover. And injury is far more serious than that. Injury needs healing, and healing is basically requiring magic. This is pretty threatening, and we can understand why the chapter is called Killing. So, the decisions that you get to make are, you state an intention, which could be attacking from surprise from behind. And if the dice tell you that you are successful, you're successful. And if the dice tell you that you're not, you're not. So you either do or don't get surprised based on what the roll says, rather than specific conditions on a grid map or something along those lines. If it all makes sense to everybody who's participating, these things can happen. So if you got two characters who are face-to-face and well aware of each other, and one of the players decided to narrate that they were attacking from behind from surprise, this would be something that maybe the other players would object to. But if you're at all interested in combat and combatives, this kind of open system allows you to be really descriptive and bring your knowledge of how bodies work together in violence to have a lot of fun, and I did. But it doesn't require that you have this kind of knowledge. It doesn't force you into that situation. So you can still, very casually or very loosely describe your attack and roll your dice and go through the combat procedure and still have a very gritty and very solid seeming combat experience. So really quite happy. So I'm happy with the situation. I'm happy with what the characters did in the situation. Very impressed with Aloy's ability to make all these people all around us seem real. It was very nice to have a lot of the game's mechanisms come into play, such as ascending characters from an unnamed status into a more important status, seeing all this magic, seeing all this combat, and seeing more of the life of the community laid out than we've seen before. So that was my experience of Venture 5, and we're very much looking forward to seeing Venture 6 soon. And certainly, hopefully, in less than 13 months' time. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care.